Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. I'm Ardis Kadiu, founder and CEO of Element451, and with me today we have Erin Newton. Welcome to In Your Element.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Ardis. How was your weekend?
Amazing. It's always great to have a nice, relaxing weekend, and then coming back and starting the show. And this is the first thing Monday morning, so you get all your creative juices going. And especially being live and starting thinking about the problems and starting thinking about the solutions, certainly puts your whole week into perspective. So it's great.
Definitely. Sounds
How
good.
about yours?
It was good. It's definitely turned a little fall here, so I have sweater on. I'm excited about that.
Sweater weather. I
Sweater
think
weather.
everybody loves it.
Yep. So today, I know we want to kind of pick up where we were talking about last week about engagement and using data to inform what you're doing. And the Great Resignation is real, and at schools in particular, colleges and universities, getting hit pretty hard, and so a lot of staff that used to be there that would help with campaign development, they might have moved on, and it's particularly difficult because some schools didn't necessarily have those resources to begin with. So we at Element, we think about campaigns a lot, and have kind of over the years reverse engineered what a good campaign is, and wanted today to share what that looks like and how teams of all sizes, all different resources can benefit from taking a look at best practices and having tools like Element that kind of push those best practices into actual real functionality in a product. So you can actually send campaigns and not have to do so much guesswork and go back and get your MBA in marketing.
Well, Erin, how long have you been in marketing?
I guess my whole career, I would say. So without giving out my age, that's 15 plus years, higher ed specific, about over a decade.
And we've kind of been working and partnering together for a lot of those years as well. And one of the things that's come up over and over again is, how do you provide a better experience and how do you provide a better engagement? And the metric that a successful campaign is always measuring is, of course, the outcome of whatever you specified, but it's really engagement of that campaign, right? So it's really, how many people converted, how effective was this campaign in changing the perception of that student, and kind of driving that student to what that action was that we wanted them to go for. Given that it is kind of halfway through our fall semester, most of our schools right now are in full recruiting season. So most of their recruiting is happening towards a lot of at the undergraduate level. The recruiting is happening for seniors. So basically, everybody's driving towards applications, right? So that action that they're kind of pushing students to is apply. And that's how we're measuring our effectiveness today in terms of these campaigns. So when we start thinking about applications and we start thinking about, well, how do we engage students and how do we drive them towards applications, there's different levels, right? And certain schools are relying on the common application to get those apps in. Some others have their own application, and they only start to engage those students at the time when that student fills in an application, when they come to, when they submit that application. But as we know, marketing and the more successful campaigns, as part of our kind of experience and having done hundreds of these, or more than that, like, we understand that the students need to be engaged a lot earlier, and schools need to have a better plan for how they're going to get to those students, first of all, buying or finding where those students are through list buying or through communities, getting them the right message, and then also making sure that they're engaging them in the right way, right? They're engaging not only that student, but also influencers of that student as well. So with that being said, one of the things that we've done is, and you've been an architect of this as well, right? Taking all that experience and kind of boiling it down. Essentially, we have automated the best practices. We've taken data that, for example, we collect in Element around campaign-wide analytics and data around subject lines and around, kind of call to actions and how much text and so on. And we've kind of collected and kind of aggregated all of that in terms of best practices. And we've kind of done what we're called our packs. Now, this is not the first time that you're hearing about our packs or packs in general, but today we wanted to take one specific look at one pack in specific, which is what we call our senior search campaign. And this is typically done for folks who are undergraduate and they're applying to colleges, but it can be beneficial for a lot of other audiences as well. So this one, it's basically it's one of the campaigns that there's been a lot of services around, and there's a lot of vendors, and there's a lot of marketing agencies that are essentially pulling all of these components together, and they're saying it's a application generation or senior search campaign. So, Erin, let's go through this, and let's go through some of the components in here of this campaign, and let's demystify this, right? Because
right.
at the core of it, it can seem pretty complex. It's, oh, we're going to have all these different emails. We're going to sequence them. We're going to segment them. We're going to use all of this data. But let's take it at the core. What is at the core of this? Remember?
Right. It's that apply. And I think if you simplify a campaign before you do anything, it's what do we want it to do? And it's we want people to apply. And then from there, you also have your measurement. So you can see how it's going to be successful. And I would assume, because I've been there myself, when you're thinking, oh my God, I got to design a campaign, it's very easy to start to just overcomplicate immediately. But really, if you boil it down to its essence of what do I want somebody to do when they read this, and then that's also your goal internally to measure how successful it is, everything else can derive from there. So it makes it a very easy framework when you're putting something together. And so that's how we built packs, is to think, okay, senior search, what's the goal going to be and how do I get there? So we know we want a certain number of emails, a cadence. That's the other thing for engagement. You want there to be a certain establish a rhythm between your communications and when you're interacting with your students. Same thing if you just think about, you're having a conversation with somebody like we are here, there's a back and forth. There's a time where you communicate something, you kind of wait and see, and that might be the time maybe they click on that CTA, maybe they request other information, and then you can have other emails. But that's really the key things to think about, is your goal and the sequence of your messages, and then the content for each of them. And
So the content. So in this case, then, taking it for senior search, we're driving that student to apply, and obviously that student might know something about us or might not know anything about the school. So the first email that we've had here is an introduction email, so an introduction to that school, right? One of the things that we can see is that you always want to, just like a meeting in person, you always want to introduce yourself to that student, and you want to personalize the aspect of the school that that student would be interested in, or you want to reflect how your school is going to, how you're going to present yourself to that student, right? Like, what are you bringing to the table? Why should that student even look at your school? What do you have going on? So as you look over here, one of the things that comes up is we have now personalized this communication in two different areas, right? We are taking a one of the things you can do is take a geographic approach to this first introduction. Folks who are very close to you might be more, and we've seen this work really, really well when you were personalizing graphics, when we're personalizing different components. But one of the things that we see is students who are close, they probably have heard of you, and you want to present yourself a little bit differently. So what we've done here is we have a version for seniors within a 100-mile radius, because that's probably drivable, and another one that it's a little bit different, right? So when you look at this subject line, a college home close to home. So an education in exploration. So a little bit different subject lines in here, and as you're looking through these, they one of the things that we've done is we've kind of highlighted some of the academics, right? So if you want to do that, we have had some areas open here for that. So now, Erin, talk me through, like, what's the thought process behind this email? It seems a little bit long, but as I look at this, right, as we let's kind of edit this really quick, and let's preview it. So as we preview it here on mobile or even a tablet device, that student is going to look at this first screen here. And what are some of the components, or what are the best practices here?
Sure, sure. So I would say, for the subject line, that's the first place you want to think about. That's the first thing that they're going to see. So when we talk about the recipient, you want to really
Mhm.
put your mindset in where they're coming from. So the kind of rationale behind, if they are close to your campus, you're probably drawing on things that would
Right.
attract them because they're nearby. So you want to have keywords about that. If they're coming from far away, that's where you're talking about exploration. So you can kind of get in a generalize what the people would want to read, and then maybe they'll open. So each step, each piece of content is moving up to that main goal.
Right.
So here in the intro, we have, you say something about them. It's not necessarily about the school.
Yeah.
And that's a really important thing too. It's not like you want to approach this as, I want to tell you everything that's on our about page. Not at all. You want
Exactly.
to kind of let them know that this is someplace that they're going to feel confident and feel part of. And then
Hmm.
that, again, that teases on, and hopefully you get their interest to read on to the next paragraph. We all know
Exactly.
how incredibly short people's attention span is. So you want like one line, and if they read that, maybe they'll read the next thing.
Right.
And
Exactly.
the
Exactly.
strong imagery.
Exactly.
So
S-
that's the thinking.
So one of the things that obviously has to be mobile friendly, right? Like, so as we look at this, right, we're displaying this in mobile friendly, structurally speaking, on these emails. So you have your branding, you know where it's coming from. You have very strong imagery here. Maybe this is that version for campus, but then let's make this a little bit bigger, and let's see, for example, if we have this within a certain mileage, so you can see that campus. Otherwise, we have this different image. So as we look at that, like, just look at this, right? This is just that first screen that you see on mobile, and you don't have a lot of content. Like Erin said, very personalized. We know that who you are. We, it's something about them, and then a call to action right away. Now, that is the essence of a lot of the different emails that you're going to be sending out. Now, of course, every student, if they want to understand a little bit more, they're going to go down and start reading about the different areas. But you also, the other thing here, as you move through, one of the things that you want to do is, again, repeat that call to action here at the bottom. The thing that, a lot of traditional marketing or email marketing says that you should only put one link in the message, and that's fine. That doesn't really hold true anymore. However, for some of these emails, you can certainly do that, but you can certainly repeat those call to action. So as the student goes down, think about a landing page. It works exactly the same way, right? So as they got through, they might want to now take that action again. So again, the highlights or the structure, personalized, component here, strong call to action, content that tells you a little bit about it, and then going down again in terms of the call to action here again. Now, we have sent thousands of these emails out, or even more than that, and all the data suggests that this is this components and how these are set up. This is the best approach to that. Of course, it can change a little bit differently from audience to audience, but that's kind of what we're doing here. We're putting everything into that best practice. Now, we can go on and kind of talk individually about all these different emails that we have as part of that campaign, Erin. However, how about we take a second and look at some of the other communications here, so you can tell us exactly how we're thinking. We took a look at the structure of the communication. Now let's take a look at the the sequence, or the subjects, or the topics rather, right? So let's take a look at those.
Right. And one thing to think about, you don't need fancy, expensive market research firms, or you can do a survey of your students that are already on campus and say,
Hmm.
what were the things that you wanted to learn about before you came to our school?
Yeah.
You might know those. It's always good to verify and validate that. There might be things that students loved about your school that are not something that you think about that is a main driver to attract them. So I would say that's a good place to start for these topics. And that's kind of what we've done over the years. We've sent, as Ardis said, so many of these campaigns. We can see what students really want to learn about. So you start at that broader topic level, and then you can personalize on each one. We know
Hmm.
financial aid is top of mind for everyone.
Yep.
We know, they want to know what their campus life is like, if it's a on-campus experience, what they're going to study. And,
Hmm.
when you dive into these emails, it's similar to what you would see on a landing page. It's broken up to make it feel like I can get the information that I need quickly. And
Yeah.
those walls of text, just forget about them. Just another way to think about it is kind of, how would you do a social media post or ad? When you're
Yeah.
creating those, it's probably you don't even realize it, but you find that key message in your first sentence.
Yeah.
And you have that CTA right there, and all of that translates really, really well to email. So
Yeah.
that's how we've come up with these topics.
Now, Erin, one more thing. We pivoted very quickly last year as COVID, and I recently read that one of the 20 there was a recent survey. 25% of the current students, they disapprove, or they feel that their school handled communications around COVID uh, incorrectly, or they did not handle it well at all. So communicating about COVID has been, one of those things where if you did it and you did it consistently, and you actually, had it in mind, it was a plus for you. But if you didn't, then you actually see those students leaving those schools, or kind of transferring because of some of that communication. So we've, having that in there has been important. Now, as we continue, you can see how COVID prep and COVID kind of protocols, now they can transition to things like health and well-being. So communicating and adding something around health and well-being on campuses becomes even more important. Gen Z, so they care a lot about, mental health, and they care a lot about kind of those topics. So you got to make sure that you're kind of introducing them in the communication. So they're just as important as some of the outcomes. They're just as important, of course, as the financials. They care about, the health, their mental health, and kind of their safety, and psychological safety on campus as well. Um, all right. So the next thing that we wanted to show here, and maybe Erin, you see this component, which is you see some SMS in here, and you see email as well. So I wanted to go to this one specifically and kind of take a look. We have a SMS component and an email component. Now, based on our best practices, and what our data tells us, is that students are opening, or everybody is opening emails. They're opening SMS messages within just a couple of minutes. So I think the statistic is 95% of people are opening they're reading their SMS messages within the first couple of minutes that they receive them. Now, that's an astounding number, right? So SMS and MMS messaging has become a clear channel for that. So start introducing those as part of your campaign. As a matter of fact, you have to. Otherwise, you're losing out on the opportunity to get to that student. They might not use email as a primary channel. They might not read it. It might go to spam. But SMS has really become a channel now where everyone has to be there, and kind of combining communications both in email and SMS is really important as well. Any thoughts?
I would just say that how easy it is in this to do them both at one time. You don't have to set up, okay, I'm going to make the
Exactly.
email and then I'm going to do the SMS.
Exactly.
Create the same message in one campaign.
Exactly.
And it's all synced into as we were talking about before, setting that expectation of the cadence, of the frequency of the messages. And so here you're
Exactly.
able to orchestrate all of that from one place.
Yeah. So then the last part that we wanted to talk about, and I know that we're running a little bit long today, but there's just so much kind of getting into that, was the notion of how do you put all these communications together. And what we've done here is we have kind of built together in our campaigns, we've built together the series, right? So here each step, and essentially, rather than loading all those students and sending them a communication like in batches, what we've done here is that as soon as that student enters your flow, maybe you're getting an inquiry form, or maybe that student is coming from a fair or wherever, but haven't started an application. You want to trigger and enter them into a workflow at their own time, and have that cadence be personalized to their time, right? So one of the things that we've done in here is we have multiple triggers. So when they join a specific segment, then they're able to enter into these workflows. And what you see here is that we've kind of labeled all of these steps based on the information and based on the topics. So something about career, an introduction to the school, financial information, right? Academics at the school, student life, a direct apply message, right? So we've done all these components. And the best thing is, as you see over here, we have these delays. So best practices in terms of the delays between different steps. You see 2 days here with an SMS after an email. Well, we've know that that's, why wait another 7 days, right? It's like best based on our best practices, we know that sending that message right after is top of mind, that SMS message. We have financial information. So this again, 3 days after, right? So you're keeping that cadence of email, SMS 5 days after. So we are making sure that we're kind of, hitting that student pretty quickly and pretty often in the beginning, and then kind of waiting a little bit longer as this time goes on to kind of run that cadence out. The other part that you're seeing here, which is really interesting, is this idea of, well, what happens if that student already is already starting an application? Well, we check if they have, and then guess what? We now are tying that in to an to a submit application or to an application push campaign, which we can go into a whole other section, but we want to drive that student through that. So as soon as they start the application, now you want to keep them engaged and kind of completing that application. So again, based on the best practices, these are some of the things that we can set up. And of course, perhaps we can kind of expand on that a little bit more next week as well. What do you think, Erin?
I think that's a great idea. I was thinking about how important automation is for how schools are getting leads now, or prospects. That the list buying is not as effective as it once was. So there are a lot of new ways that people are going to be coming to your school to be interested, and automating these campaigns is key to meeting their expectations and where they are based on how they entered. And you don't want to have to do any of that manually, because it is just basically impossible. And back to that, you don't want to send a message right after somebody started an application and they're like, hey, I just started this. Why are you
Exactly.
still asking me to do that? And so there's so much to talk about with the automation, and how it makes not just internally things easier, but the experience for the student is just so much better when things are automated and predictable and meet expectations.
Yeah, exactly. It really helps your team be more efficient and more effective, and let the CRM, let the tools do all the heavy lifting. And ultimately, what you're interested in and what I'm showing you here is this idea of now you have that yield or that search campaign or decision campaign, and you can see in Element what we've done is, because we're combining all these communications together, all we have to do is tag those communications, and then now we can get aggregate data on how they're performing, right? So are they performing well, and over time as well? And that's kind of what you're seeing here in our more visual based, like where you can see the different emails and the campaigns, and kind of they all roll up together. And of course, ultimately, this drives you to the notion of, where are my students coming from, what's most effective, and that's our sources, and we can talk more about that later. But ultimately, for next week, we're going to talk about the automation component. How can we set up campaigns that are driving that student from inquiry all the way, tying as soon as that student becomes an inquiry, how do we push them towards an application based on the audience? How do we, if they start an application, how do we drive them to complete that application? If they complete it, how can we now keep them up to date with, information about their checklist? And then how can we send them to a microsite so they can be even more engaged, but tying all those pieces together. So it's all about the automation components.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. We ran a little bit long today, traditionally about 15 to 20 minutes, but we feel like these campaigns and kind of the best practice and what we have in there are really important. And, let us know if you have any questions that you want us to cover next week. Post in our feeds, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you're watching this from. Otherwise, we'll see you all next week.
Sounds good. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Bye.